Imagine you've worked your whole life to create the perfect life. You're a successful lawyer with a growing career, a loving spouse who has been by your side through thick and thin, and 4 beautiful children who adore you. Your father, a retired doctor, has been your role model and rock, guiding you with wisdom and unwavering support. For years, he's been the pillar of your family, someone you've trusted above all else. Your life seems stable, fulfilling, and everything you ever dreamed it would be. But then, out of nowhere, the perfect image shatters. It begins with a simple DNA test meant to help your youngest child, who's battling a rare medical condition. You're concerned, of course, but confident that the results will provide clarity and answers. Instead, what the test reveals shakes you to your core. None of your 4 children share your DNA. At first, you think there must be some mistake. Labs mix up results all the time, right? But after retesting, the truth becomes undeniable, and what you learn next feels like something out of a nightmare. The DNA points to someone else in your family, not a distant cousin, not a sibling. The biological father of all 4 of your children is the man you've trusted more than anyone else in the world, your own father. In that moment, your life crumbles. The man you idolized, the man who helped you become the person you are today, has betrayed you in the most personal and unthinkable way. How could this happen? How long has this secret been hidden from you? And why? The betrayal runs so deep that it's not just about broken trust. It's about the destruction of your identity, your family, and everything you thought you knew. This is the shocking, gut-wrenching story of a Florida lawyer who was forced to confront the unimaginable. A man who once held his father on a pedestal had to take him to court to seek justice for a betrayal that destroyed his family and changed his life forever. Stay tuned as we dive into this harrowing case of deceit, manipulation, and a courtroom battle that left the nation stunned. Before we dive into this chilling tales, don't forget to subscribe and like for more true crimes, stories of the human nature, mind. Mark Carter was the kind of man people admired. A top-tier attorney based in Florida, he built a reputation as a sharp legal mind and a compassionate professional. His career was thriving, with high-profile cases and a growing list of accomplishments. Outside the courtroom, Mark had a seemingly perfect personal life, a loving wife, 4 beautiful children, and a home filled with warmth and laughter. Friends and colleagues often described him as the quintessential family man, someone who balanced the demands of his career with an unwavering devotion to his loved ones. At the heart of Mark's success story was his father, Dr. Henry Carter. A retired physician with decades of service to the community, Henry was more than just a parent. He was Mark's guiding light. Henry had raised Mark alone after the untimely passing of Mark's mother, teaching him the values of hard work, integrity, and perseverance. For Mark, Henry wasn't just a father, he was a mentor, a hero, and the cornerstone of the family. It was Henry's influence that inspired Mark to push through the challenges of law school and establish a life of stability and accomplishment. To the outside world, the Carter family seemed untouchable, a picture of success, harmony, and mutual respect. But soon, everything came crashing down in a way no one could have imagined. The unraveling began with an unassuming medical procedure, a DNA test for Mark's youngest child, Ella. The test, intended to shed light on a rare genetic condition, revealed something that would destroy the foundation of Mark's family. When the results came back, they didn't just show a medical anomaly, they exposed a devastating truth. The DNA analysis revealed that Mark was not the biological father of Ella. Initially, Mark brushed it off as a laboratory error, but as more tests were conducted, his worst fears materialized. One by one, the tests showed that none of his 4 children shared his DNA. The results pointed to a shocking biological match. Henry, the man Mark had trusted implicitly, wasn't just a grandfather to his children, he was their biological father. The revelation hit like a thunderclap, leaving Mark reeling. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of unimaginable proportions. The man who had shaped Mark's values, taught him to stand for justice, and guided him through life's challenges, had been living a double life, deceiving him for years. Henry's actions weren't just a breach of morality, they were a direct attack on the integrity of Mark's family. What followed was nothing short of a courtroom spectacle. Mark, determined to seek justice for the betrayal and manipulation, filed a lawsuit against his own father. The case that unfolded was filled with emotional testimonies, damning evidence, and revelations so shocking, they left those who followed the story in disbelief. It wasn't just a legal battle. It was a deeply personal confrontation that laid bare the fragility of trust, the weight of betrayal, and the lengths one man would go to protect his family. Mark's journey from respected attorney and family man to a plaintiff in a lawsuit against his father was a tragic fall from grace, one that captivated the public and left a lasting impression on all who heard his story. This wasn't just about legal arguments or DNA results. It was about the destruction of a family and the fight to rebuild what had been shattered. Mark Carter, 42, was the kind of man people looked up to. From his modest beginnings in a small Florida town, Mark had risen to the top of his field through hard work, determination, and a knack for delivering results in high-stakes cases. Graduating at the top of his class from Harvard Law School was just the beginning. He quickly built a name for himself in corporate litigation, establishing his own successful law firm that catered to some of the biggest clients in the region. His sharp mind, integrity, and professionalism made him a respected figure in both the legal world and his local community. But Mark's greatest pride wasn't his career. It was his family. He often said that his success meant little without the love and support of those closest to him. His wife, Jessica, had been by his side since their college years, back when Mark was a law student balancing grueling coursework and part-time jobs. Jessica, a former teacher with a nurturing spirit, had supported Mark every step of the way, even when it meant putting her own dreams on hold. Together, Mark and Jessica had built a life that many would envy. They lived in a picturesque suburban neighborhood in Florida, complete with tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and a strong sense of community. Their home was always filled with laughter and the energy of their 4 children. 12-year-old Emma, the curious and artistic eldest child, 10-year-old twins Noah and Ava, whose boundless energy kept the household lively, and 6-year-old Ella, the family's youngest, whose playful innocence charmed everyone she met. Jessica had transitioned from teaching to becoming a full-time mom, a role she embraced wholeheartedly. She was the glue that held the family together, from organizing themed family movie nights to planning elaborate birthday parties for the kids. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Friends and neighbors often admired how seamlessly Jessica managed the household, always balancing the chaos of raising 4 kids with a warm and welcoming smile. Family was a cornerstone of Mark's life, and at the center of it all was his father, Dr. Henry Carter. A retired physician, Henry was a beloved figure in their community, known for his decades of service at the local hospital and his volunteer work at free clinics. After losing his wife, Mark's mother, when Mark was just a teenager, Henry had single-handedly raised his son with unwavering dedication. Mark often credited his father for shaping his values, teaching him discipline, and instilling a strong sense of justice. Henry was more than just a father to Mark. He was a mentor and role model. To the Carter family, he was a larger-than-life figure who commanded respect and admiration. He frequently joined them for Sunday dinners, family vacations, and school events. At gatherings, Henry would often regale the kids with stories from his days as a doctor, leaving everyone captivated by his wisdom and charm. He seemed to take pride in his role as a grandfather, doting on Mark's children and always making time for their games and milestones. From the outside, the Carter family seemed untouchable, a shining example of love, stability, and success. Friends marveled at how seamlessly Mark and Jessica managed their busy lives while still prioritizing their family. Their home was the hub of the neighborhood, the go-to spot for weekend barbecues and holiday celebrations. Mark and Jessica's partnership appeared rock solid, and their children were thriving in every way. But beneath the surface of this idyllic family dynamic, cracks were forming. While no one outside the family suspected a thing, subtle tensions and secrets were beginning to take their toll. The closeness between Henry and Jessica, once brushed off as familial affection, would later be scrutinized in an entirely different light. And Mark, focused on his career and unaware of the storm brewing in his own home, had no idea how fragile the foundation of his family really was. The Carters may have appeared perfect, but as time would reveal, their story was anything but. What lay beneath the polished exterior was a secret so devastating that it would turn their lives upside down and leave a once admired family shattered. The cracks in the Carter family's seemingly perfect life began to show when 6-year-old Ella, the youngest of the 4 Carter children, started experiencing troubling symptoms. She complained of persistent joint pain, and her parents noticed that she seemed more tired than usual, often battling recurring fevers that didn't respond to the usual treatments. Jessica, ever the doting mother, was the first to take her concerns to their pediatrician. After several routine visits and no clear answers, the doctor referred Ella to a specialist for further tests. The family was worried, but remained hopeful. Mark reassured Jessica that modern medicine would surely uncover the issue, and with Henry's background as a physician, they felt they had the added wisdom and support to navigate whatever lay ahead. The specialist suggested genetic testing as part of the diagnostic process. It was a logical next step, as many rare conditions have hereditary links. Both Mark and Jessica were asked to submit their DNA to build a complete medical profile that could guide Ella's treatment. It seemed like a simple formality, a routine step toward understanding their daughter's condition. When the results came back, no one was prepared for what they revealed. Ella's DNA showed no genetic connection to Mark. At first, the specialist gently explained that this could be a rare laboratory error. Mistakes do happen after all, and the Carters were encouraged to repeat the test to rule out any inaccuracies. But when the retest results arrived, the findings were the same. Mark was not Ella's biological father. Confusion turned to disbelief as the doctor explained that Ella's genetic markers matched someone else entirely. Mark's mind raced. He clung to the possibility that there had been a clerical error or a mishandling of the samples. But as doubt crept in, so did questions he wasn't ready to confront. Could there be a darker explanation? Was it possible that Jessica had been unfaithful? Determined to uncover the truth, Mark insisted on extending the testing to his other 3 children. He tried to maintain his composure, brushing off Jessica's growing concern by claiming it was just a precaution. Deep down, though, Mark was bracing himself for what he feared might be a devastating revelation. When the results came back, they confirmed his worst nightmare. None of his 4 children shared his DNA. Not Emma, his creative and curious 12-year-old. Not the twins, Noah and Ava, who were a bundle of energy and the spitting image of each other. And not little Ella, the baby of the family who had first prompted the tests. But the shock didn't stop there. The tests also revealed the identity of the biological father. The genetic markers pointed to one person, Dr. Henry Carter, Mark's own father. Mark's hands trembled as he stared at the report, its sterile language failing to dull the emotional blow. His first reaction was denial. This can't be real. There has to be some mistake. My father wouldn't. But as the reality set in, a flood of emotions followed. Rage, betrayal, humiliation, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Mark's mind became a whirlwind of questions he couldn't answer. How could this happen? Had Jessica been involved in an affair with Henry for years? If so, how could his father, a man he trusted and idolized, betray him in such a horrifying way. Memories of family dinners, vacations, and father-son bonding moments flashed through his mind, now tainted by the discovery. He couldn't bring himself to confront Jessica immediately. The betrayal was too raw, and the answers he feared would only deepen his pain. Instead, Mark replayed every interaction with his father and Jessica in his mind, searching for signs he might have missed. Every hug, every shared laugh, and every glance between them now seemed suspicious, even sinister. The man who had been his moral compass, his greatest supporter, and his lifelong role model had shattered the foundation of trust that Mark had built his life upon. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was the kind of deception that could destroy a person from the inside out. With his world turned upside down, Mark realized he couldn't ignore what he had uncovered. He needed answers. But more than that, he needed justice. For himself, for his children, and for the life that had been built on lies. The DNA results were more than just numbers on a page. They were the beginning of a nightmare that would change everything Mark thought he knew about love, loyalty, and family. Mark couldn't sleep that night. The DNA results burned in his mind, an undeniable truth that threatened to destroy everything he had built. The man he trusted the most, his father, and the woman he had loved since his youth, his wife, were now at the center of an unthinkable betrayal. He couldn't ignore it. He needed answers, no matter how painful they might be. As the clock neared midnight, Mark decided he couldn't wait another moment. He confronted Jessica in their bedroom, holding the DNA report in his trembling hands. His voice, filled with both heartbreak and anger, cut through the silence. "Explain this," he demanded, tossing the papers onto the bed. Jessica's face went pale as her eyes scanned the report. She didn't even attempt to feign ignorance. Her lips quivered, and tears began streaming down her face as the reality of the situation settled over her. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Her apology wasn't enough. Mark pressed her for the truth, each question growing sharper and more desperate. Cornered and overwhelmed, Jessica broke down, sobbing uncontrollably as she admitted the unthinkable. She had been having an affair with Henry. The confession hit Mark like a freight train. He stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the dresser to steady himself. For a moment, he felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. Jessica, through her tears, began to explain. She revealed that the affair had started shortly after their wedding, during the early years of their marriage, when Mark was deeply engrossed in building his career. At the time, Mark had been working long hours, often leaving Jessica to navigate the challenges of early marriage and motherhood alone. She described feeling isolated, lonely, and unsure of how to communicate her needs. "I was vulnerable," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "And Henry, he was always there. He listened. He made me feel important." Jessica claimed that Henry had stepped into the void that Mark's absence created. At first, his gestures seemed innocent, offering advice, lending a listening ear, and providing support during difficult times. But over time, those moments of comfort evolved into something much darker. "He told me I deserved better," Jessica admitted, her hands trembling as she spoke. "He said you wouldn't notice, that you were too busy with work to care." Mark's anger surged as Jessica described how Henry had manipulated her. According to her, Henry had used his position of authority and trust to take advantage of her vulnerability. When the affair began, she felt trapped, unsure of how to escape without tearing the family apart. "He told me I couldn't tell you," Jessica said through her sobs. "He said it would destroy everything. The family, your career, the kids, everything we built." Mark's disgust grew with every word. He felt like a stranger in his own home, his entire life built on lies he hadn't even suspected. As much as he wanted to hate Jessica for her betrayal, Her confession pointed to someone else as the mastermind behind this web of deceit. Henry. Unable to process the full weight of Jessica's words, Mark stormed out of the room. His fury shifted toward the man he had trusted the most. He couldn't let this go unanswered. The next day, Mark drove to his father's house. His heart pounded as he knocked on the door, the DNA results folded in his pocket. Henry opened the door, his face calm and composed, as if he had no idea what was coming. "We need to talk," Mark said, his voice cold and steely. Inside, Mark laid out everything, the DNA results, Jessica's confession, and the years of deceit that had torn his world apart. As Mark spoke, Henry's calm demeanor never wavered. When Mark finally stopped, expecting an apology, or at least an explanation, Henry's response stunned him. "This is a private family matter," Henry said dismissively. "There's no need to blow it out of proportion." Mark's jaw dropped. His father, the man he had idolized his entire life, showed no remorse. Instead, Henry seemed more concerned about protecting his own reputation than acknowledging the harm he had caused. When pressed further, Henry denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that the relationship had been consensual and that Jessica was just as responsible as he was. His tone was cold, almost clinical, as he brushed off Mark's outrage. "You're overreacting, son," Henry said. "These things happen. There's no point in dragging this through the mud." Mark's rage boiled over. His father's casual dismissal of the situation was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. For years, Mark had looked up to Henry as a moral compass, a man of integrity who had guided him through life's challenges. Now that image was shattered, replaced by a man who was unapologetically selfish and manipulative. The humiliation was almost too much to bear. Henry's betrayal wasn't just a violation of trust. It was an attack on Mark's identity as a husband, a father, and a son. The more Mark thought about it, the angrier he became. His father's actions had robbed him of years of memories with his children, his marriage, and his sense of security. But this wasn't just about Mark. His children were now caught in the middle of this nightmare, their lives forever changed by a secret they had no part in. Mark couldn't stand by and let Henry walk away unscathed. He made a decision that day. He would hold his father accountable, not just for himself, but for his family and the life that Henry's actions had destroyed. The investigation into the truth wasn't just about uncovering what had happened. It was about reclaiming the pieces of a life that had been shattered by betrayal. You'd like to tweak anything. Mark's decision to take his father to court was not just about justice. It was about reclaiming his sense of self and standing up for the family Henry had so deeply fractured. The lawsuit, filed on grounds of fraud, emotional distress, and intentional harm, sent shockwaves through their community. Word of the case quickly spread beyond Florida, and soon it became a national story, captivating people across the country. News outlets latched onto the scandal, painting it as a dramatic battle of morality and betrayal. The headlines were explosive. Florida lawyer sues father in DNA scandal, father-in-law and lover, a family destroyed by secrets, and courtroom drama, family feud takes a shocking turn. The media frenzy only added to the tension, with journalists camping outside the courthouse and talk shows debating the ethical and legal complexities of the case. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Mark sat with his legal team, his face a mask of determination. Henry, ever the composed doctor, exuded an air of arrogance. His lawyer presented him as a man unfairly vilified, someone whose private life had been dragged into the public eye by a vengeful son. Meanwhile, Jessica, pale and visibly shaken, sat quietly in the back of the room, avoiding Henry's gaze. The opening argument set the stage for what would become an emotionally charged trial. Mark's lawyer presented the case as a gross abuse of power and trust, highlighting Henry's calculated manipulation and the devastating impact on Mark and his children. The jury, a mix of men and women from various backgrounds, listened intently as the lawyers painted two starkly different pictures of the same events. Jessica's testimony was the turning point. When she took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She looked visibly nervous, her hands trembling as she clutched the edges of the witness stand. Her lawyer guided her gently through her account, asking her to recount how the affair began and the role Henry played in their relationship. "It wasn't something I wanted," Jessica began, her voice breaking. "At first, he seemed like a mentor, someone I could turn to when I felt overwhelmed. But over time, he pushed the boundaries." She described how Henry had slowly gained control over her, taking advantage of moments when she felt isolated in her marriage. "He made me feel like I wasn't enough for Mark," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "He said things like, 'You deserve more,' and 'Mark doesn't appreciate you.' It started with words, but it turned into something more, something I couldn't escape from." The courtroom was captivated as Jessica recounted how Henry used his position of authority to silence her. "He told me no one would believe me if I ever spoke out," she said, her voice cracking. "He said it would ruin the family, ruin Mark's career, and destroy the children's lives. I felt trapped." Her testimony was heartbreaking, but it also raised difficult questions. Henry's defense seized on her words, suggesting that the relationship had been consensual and that Jessica was using the trial to shift blame. When Henry took the stand, his demeanor was a stark contrast to Jessica's emotional testimony. He was calm, confident, and unrepentant. He denied manipulating Jessica, claiming that their relationship had been mutual and consensual. "This is nothing more than a vendetta," he said coldly, addressing the jury. "Mark is using this trial to humiliate me, to turn his personal grievances into a public spectacle." Henry's words drew mixed reactions from the courtroom. To some, his calmness seemed calculated, almost sinister. To others, it painted him as a victim of overreach. His lawyer doubled down, portraying Henry as a man whose mistakes had been blown out of proportion. "This trial isn't about justice, it's about revenge," his lawyer argued, pointing toward Mark. The case wasn't just about the adults involved. It deeply affected the Carter children. Emma, the eldest, had always been close to her grandfather, spending countless weekends listening to his stories and seeking his advice. But after the truth came out, everything changed. Emma began withdrawing from family events, distancing herself from the man she had once adored. "How do you forgive someone who lied to you your whole life?" she reportedly asked her therapist. The twins, Noah and Ava, were too young to fully understand the scandal, but sensed the tension in the household. They struggled with conflicting emotions, anger, confusion, and sadness. Ella, the youngest, was blissfully unaware of the situation's full scope, but even she noticed the absence of her once loving grandfather. As the trial progressed, the emotional toll on the Carter family became more evident. Mark's resolve to fight for justice was unwavering, but the process was draining. Friends and neighbors offered mixed reactions. Some applauded his bravery for standing up to his father, while others questioned whether airing such personal grievances in court was the right decision. Through it all, the courtroom drama exposed the layers of betrayal, manipulation, and the profound impact of Henry's actions. It wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning, one that left no part of the family untouched. After months of intense courtroom battles filled with emotional testimonies and shocking revelations, the jury delivered its verdict. The court ruled in Mark's favor. Henry was found guilty of inflicting emotional distress, fraud, and intentional harm. The court ordered him to pay $2 million in damages, a judgment meant to compensate Mark for the devastating personal losses caused by his father's betrayal. The ruling didn't just have financial consequences, it also destroyed Henry's once sterling reputation. Once a respected physician and admired community figure, he became a social outcast overnight. Friends, colleagues, and neighbors distanced themselves from him, unable to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the manipulative actions revealed during the trial. The court's judgment publicly condemned Henry's behavior, leaving him to face the repercussions of his actions in isolation. But for Mark, the victory was far from sweet. Winning in court didn't erase the pain, humiliation, or sense of loss he had endured. The financial settlement was a hollow comfort in the face of the emotional wreckage that now defined his life. His marriage to Jessica, irreparably damaged by the betrayal, came to an end shortly after the trial. Mark filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, though he made a conscious effort to co-parent amicably for the sake of their 4 children. Mark's primary focus after the trial was on healing, for himself and for his children. He began therapy to process the betrayal and rebuild his sense of trust and self-worth. He also enrolled his children in counseling, understanding that the impact of Henry's actions went far beyond the courtroom. His eldest daughter, Emma, in particular, struggled with feelings of anger and confusion, questioning her identity and the relationships she had cherished. "I knew rebuilding my family wouldn't be easy," Mark later admitted to a close friend. "But I owed it to my kids to show them that we could move forward even after something this devastating." Jessica, too, sought help to process her role in the affair and the impact it had on her children. While the divorce was difficult, she and Mark worked together to maintain a sense of stability for their kids, prioritizing their well-being over their personal grievances. Meanwhile, Henry remained unapologetic. He refused to acknowledge the harm he had caused or take responsibility for the ripple effects of his actions. Isolated and disgraced, he withdrew from public life, living out his days in a small, nondescript apartment far from the community he once called home. To this day, he has not reached out to Mark or his grandchildren, choosing instead to wallow in his denial. For many, Henry's name became a cautionary tale, a symbol of how power and manipulation can destroy even the closest of bonds. His story is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal and the fragility of trust. Though the scars of the ordeal remain, Mark is determined to rebuild his life. He focuses on creating a new sense of normalcy for his children, vowing to lead with honesty, integrity, and the values he once thought his father represented. In the end, while the trial brought some sense of justice, the journey toward healing and redemption continues. What are your thoughts on this shocking case? Do you think Mark was justified in taking his father to court? Or do you believe this is the kind of situation that should have been handled privately within the family? Betrayal of this magnitude is rare, but when it happens, it leaves behind deep emotional scars. Could you ever forgive a betrayal like this from someone you trusted completely? Or would you feel compelled to seek justice, as Mark did? Imagine being in Mark's shoes, discovering that not only had your spouse been unfaithful, but the betrayal came from your own parent, someone you idolized and trusted implicitly. How do you think you would cope with such a revelation? Would you cut ties completely, or try to reconcile for the sake of your children? Let us know in the comments below how you think you'd handle a situation like this. This case also raises bigger questions about family dynamics and trust. Was Mark's decision to take this to court brave, or do you think it might have caused even more damage to his family? There's no denying the emotional weight of such a decision, but was it the right one? Your opinion matters, and we'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoy unraveling unbelievable true crime stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Tomorrow, we'll dive into another mind-boggling case. Florida preacher and his fiancée killed on their wedding day by his felon baby mama. You won't want to miss it.